Again, welcome everybody to this webinar. We're awfully glad to have you with us. My name is Matt Reichert, and I'm pleased to be the director of the Center for Learning, a division of OCP that's dedicated to liturgical formation and professional development for pastoral ministers. Thank you all who are joining us live as participants. Thanks for being here. Those of you who are watching this video recording, thanks for taking the time to watch this video. We hope that you have at least a couple of ideas and practical resources to take away to best serve your parish community and those who worship with you. I'm so happy to have our panelists with us today. I'm gonna, Timothy and Rita, I'm gonna have you introduce yourselves here in just a second. So happy to have our panelists here today who represent a wealth of experience from national organizations and publishing to parish ministry, diocesan ministry. So from a variety of perspectives, we're going to be able to speak about parish liturgy committees or worship commissions or whatever your local church might call them. So again, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A. If you're watching this after the fact, please feel free to reach out and email us with your questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. Just in order, I see you on my screen. Timothy, would you mind saying hello and introducing yourselves for our guests?
Sure. I am Timothy Johnston, and I am in Chicago. I am a pastoral associate currently at St. Thomas the Apostle Parish in Hyde Park, and I'm very happy to be with all of you today. I've been in diocesan ministry, as Matt had noted, in St. Cloud and in Salt Lake City and a few other places. And so this is my first full-time parish job, and really happy to have this new experience in my life and have this conversation about parish liturgy committees.
Great, thanks, Timothy. Glad to have you with us. And Rita, if you wouldn't mind saying hello.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rita Thiron. I'm the Executive Director of the Federation of Diocesan Liturgical Commissions. Our national organization is made up of all the members of diocesan liturgical commissions and people who staff the offices of worship for their bishops all across the country. Good, hardworking people devoted to the liturgy. Before that, I was 20 years at an office of worship in the Diocese of Lansing, and before that, I was the director of adult education and the catechumenate at a parish in Michigan. I also chair currently my parish worship commission here in Washington. So I hope I bring all of that to the table, and I'm happy to be with you today.
Yeah, thanks, Rita. Thanks, Timothy. We are certainly blessed to have both of you here and talking about this topic. I am going to take one quick second. Again, those of you joining live, those of you watching the recording, I'm going to share my screen just to do a little orientation for the types of things that you'll find in the resource packet. We might make reference to them during this conversation, so you have a sense of what we're referring to. We might not. This is just a collection of things that we hope you will find helpful today as part of this conversation, coming out of this conversation, and in the months ahead. So I want you to have a sense of what's there for eventually when you're able to get to it. Again, this resource, like this webinar, is free. You're welcome to download it, print it, adapt things that the Center for Learning has created, share them with other colleagues. So in this packet, and I'm going to do my best as I scroll through here to not go too fast because I don't want to make you motion sick. But if you take a look, in addition to finding out more about the Center for Learning and what our mission is, I've provided this article from America Magazine that I've found very helpful from Kathy Lindell on the Ministry of Parish Liturgy Committees. That includes that Kathy provides for us a variety of best practices or things to think about, 10 of them, in fact. So we have this article represented here from our friends at America Magazine in full, and we've added for you a couple of reflection or discussion questions. So this might be something for you and your pastor, or you and other members of your parish ministry to read through and to discuss. After this, there's a couple of quotes, helpful quotes from documents, some guidelines. I know we'll talk about the Lansing diocesan document that Rita's familiar with, but some templates or some examples of what you'll find in other diocesan resources or other parish resources. So here's, for your review, an example of the role of a parish worship commission, what a parish worship commission does. We put together a liturgy committee assessment checklist. This is a way for you, if you have a parish liturgy committee or if you've had one in the past, to reflect on your own practice. How are we doing? How are we set up? Are we poised? And we draw here from a variety of other documents and what other parishes and dioceses have done, Kathy's article, just a way to do some self-assessment and to look forward, some action steps. What might we address? What might we set goals on as we want to make sure we're as effective as possible? So something really practical. I encourage you to print this out, give it to members of your committee or members of your ministry, and see maybe how your responses may differ from theirs. If you're looking to establish a liturgy committee or revise the liturgy committee you have, a worksheet to help you look at structure, just some guided questions you might want to think about. If you're someone who likes to write and think through writing, you might want to print this out. Otherwise, it's just a place to give you some direction to think about all of these various considerations that we'll talk about today. How do you keep them in forefront as you're looking at your liturgy committee structure? This is maybe a place to start. Again, if it's useful, use it, adapt it. If it's not useful, you can scroll right past. We have two examples of a liturgy committee charter, one from a parish St. Athanasius, one from St. Thomas Aquinas Catholic Church and Student Center. Two very different examples, but an idea to get you started about what a liturgy committee charter might look like if you don't have one or wish to revise yours. An agenda builder, some descriptions of things that we recommend could be on your agenda every month or however often you meet, or at least often, just to give you a sense of maybe what this could look like. This, if you have a committee that exists, might be a way for you to evaluate current practice. And then a whole host of resources for your bookshelf. So things that you might wish to look at, including some things that are hyperlinked. So the Liturgy Committee Handbook, the authors have made very generously available in full at liturgycommittee.com. So you can check that out as a resource. There's certainly other things that you can order from our publisher colleagues and friends. And then some seasonal and annual resources, one from the USCCB, and then not just because she's here, but because I mention this every time I can. If you are not familiar with the seasonal preparation aids and other resources, free and paid, from the Federation of Diocesan Liturgical Commissions, you have the URL there to check out all of the things that they have available. Do yourself a favor, after the webinar, go and check out all of the resources that are there. So again, you can check out all of these things in the handout as you are able at your leisure. And so I hope that these resources are useful to you.
Matt, can
Please
I just
go ahead,
add
Timothy? Yeah.
real quickly to those resources? One of the things, and maybe it's in there and I just didn't see it, is Pastoral Liturgy, the magazine that Liturgy Training Publications puts out. It's actually designed for liturgy committees. To everybody on the committee would get a copy so that you can do formation based on the articles and the things that are in there. So that's a great resource to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, thanks, Timothy, for adding that. And I also want to spike the ball on the point that for all of you who are watching, we're going to talk about a lot of stuff. We're going to try to be as practical as possible. At some point, chances are it'll get overwhelming, right? And there are all sorts of hardworking, very dedicated publishers, authors, organizations, dioceses, parishes, individuals who are doing God's work to give you as many practical resources. So I hope you'll check them out, both what we have to offer, but FDLC and LTP Lit Press, you name it. There are all kinds of things out there. So please know when you get to the point where it's overwhelming, chances are somebody has something out there to be able to assist. So let's kick things off, and Rita, maybe you can begin helping set some of this basic framework for us. We're talking about liturgy committees or liturgy commissions or worship commissions, whatever language or lexicon a parish or diocese might use. Give us sort of broad strokes, or start us off with what is the purpose of a liturgy committee, right? In theory, or at best, what does a liturgy committee do?
In one word, it's advisory. It's there to assist the pastor in his role as chief liturgist of the parish and the bishop as chief liturgist of his diocese. So the bishop may have his own advisory commission, a diocesan liturgical commission, but in the parish setting, you're advisory to the pastor. Now, what do you do to help the pastor have good liturgy in his diocese? First of all, You are his eyes and ears.
Hmm.
You assess the needs of the worshiping assembly and regularly evaluate the practices and to see that those needs are being met. And that means you're listening. Are people just distraught about the homily? They hate the music. You aren't the complaint department, but you are listening. And you're also keeping your eyes and ears open on Sunday mornings to see how are the children being engaged? How are the senior citizens being assisted? Is the hospitality okay? You're assessing need. So that's always good to bring that back to the pastor and to the committee. Are the various languages being met? Are people not able to participate in the liturgy because you're not even attempting to use their language or serve their needs? Secondly, you advise the pastor, pastoral coordinator, or sacramental minister, who's ever leading your parish, on all liturgical matters and even on the space itself. That is the roof falling down? Is the sound system bad? You're advising your pastor on that. You provide direction for those who prepare liturgies. I always say it is not up to this committee to buy the red geraniums for Pentecost. It's just you're looking at it from up above. You're looking at the big picture. You're looking at the liturgical season and how we best can worship God in spirit and truth and the big picture. You may on occasion assist things and help that happen, but basically you're the big picture kind of people. You don't choose the hymns, you don't pass out the bulletins, you can establish some subcommittees like the music subcommittee or the art and environment committee to help you do that. I think one of the biggest things you do is provide for the liturgical formation of all the parishioners in various methods. Throughout the Constitution and the Sacred Liturgy, that's the document I sleep with under my pillow, and you should too. It tells you that the aim and object to be considered before all else is the full conscious and active participation of the people in number 14. And that means you help them do that. Desiderio Desideravi, the Pope's recent thing, talked about liturgical formation of the people. So formation by the liturgy and for the liturgy. So you use every possible method to do that. Put an article in the bulletin, have some speakers come in, go to the school and the religious education programs, go to the senior citizen luncheon. Very little liturgical commentary when the occasion might call for it, but a variety of methods. You promote the development of competent liturgical ministers. So not only the big parish, but the liturgical ministers as well. How are your lectors trained?
Yeah.
The documents continually tell us that they should be competent and trained annually. Does that mean that they're also doing Bible study to help them do their ministry better, etc.? So the formation not only of the broader parish, but of particular ministers so that they can do their ministry better, and regular communication with all of them, and regular thank you to all of them. Really, I think that's the thing we do poorly in some of our parishes. So the lectors, the Eucharistic ministers, the servers, even the young servers or the older servers, the ushers, everybody, the music ministers. With the pastor, it implements liturgical laws, and here's where you get a little more legal. You have to know what the laws are.
Yeah. My
favorite professor in graduate school, Robert Taft, used to say, liturgy is what it is. It's not what you want it to be. So it's not a matter of taste. You have to know why the church wants us to do this on this day and why we do a Christian initiation rite in this way and in this format and on this day. And you have to know your diocesan laws as well. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Therefore, you're part of a diocese, so therefore there are laws that you will follow, and you're part of a universal church, so there's laws that your parish will follow. You set goals for the progress of the liturgical life of the parish. I always say that it's best to do that around a pool with lemonade. So annually sit down and set goals. So this year, what do we want to do better this year? What do we want to recruit more liturgical ministers? Do we want to have more formation opportunities? So you do at least an annual goal setting. And then finally, you help the parish see the connection between worship and Christian living. That's the reason we gather for liturgy is God's glorification and human sanctification. So therefore, that means what are we doing in that 1 hour on Sunday morning to help them go out the doors and live their Christian life more fully, to be more fully engaged in word and sacrament, and then go out and live the Christian life. That's an incredibly long list, an incredibly rich list, but it takes a lot of people, and it takes the pastor getting the good advice of the people on the commission.
Yeah, no, but it's so helpful, because you're right. There are so many there's so many responsibilities and opportunities for a parish, liturgy committee and it's important to know what those lanes are and what lanes aren't for the liturgy committee, at least not to be directly in, but to oversee or supervise or participate in. Timothy, again, I know you've been in a variety of diocesan offices and publishing and things too, and now in parish ministry. Either anything to add to that, or from your experience, especially around how all of these various responsibilities or areas of purview really help build the liturgical life or form the liturgical life of a parish community?
Yeah, I think my notes that I kind of wrote down, I was like, oh, like this ties in perfectly, sort of what Rita is saying, in the sense of, I think what I would add, how does all of this shape that vision is, in one way, the liturgy shapes us. That's the first and foremost place to start as a committee. And I think Rita named this very well, is like, we follow the liturgy as what it is, right? We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We're not coming and having to create something week after week. But we as members of this committee have to be shaped and formed by the church's prayer. And if we are being formed and shaped by that, then ultimately the whole community is shaped and formed by that. And so it isn't about necessarily like creating a vision, it's about articulating and implementing the vision that the Constitution of the Sacred Liturgy presents to us, the vision that is presented week after week within the Missal, which is the Paschal Mystery, and coming to celebrate that. And so the word that kept coming to my mind as Rita was sharing too was intentionality, that as the committee is gathering and they're doing their own formation, but then working to form the people, is that those goals, that vision that we're working towards, is the intentionality of how are we going to put that together. So like Rita noted, is our goal to recruit new ministers this year, and why? Like, why do we need them, and what's that going to look like? And being intentional about the decisions we make in terms of if we're doing seasonal planning, for example. So one of the things in our parish last year here that we did, even though we don't have a committee, a group of us did sit and kind of talk about this, was how did we want our entrance rites to express or help communicate the ethos, if you will, the aesthetic of the Advent season. And so we chose to use Bernadette Farrell's Litany of the Word as our entrance procession week after week. To give a sense, it takes very beautiful images, not only from the Missal, but from the prayers of the church, but it isn't quoting directly, and it invites us into a bigger picture in that way. So the committee, I think, in the ways that they're being intentional, and the kinds of decisions that they make, implementing the laws, implementing the diocesan policies and guidelines, looking at the space in which they are celebrating in, because it's going to be different here than it is going to be down the street, possibly because our space is a little bit different. Doesn't mean I'm rewriting the rules. It means I have to implement or adjust how I'm doing that to best communicate or effectively celebrate the liturgy. All of that begins to really, I think, the more intentional we are, even if it's indirectly, shape and form the identity of the Christian people. So they're going to be imbued with this spirit of the liturgy. They're going to be imbued with it because we've done all the background work, if that we need to do, in the training of the ministers, in the ways that we think about the music, even if we're not the ones picking the music, but maybe there's an overall goal, like here's what we want to do. So one of our goals, again, here at St. Thomas, because we're about 1/3 African American currently, and our school is about 95% African American, is we want to start introducing more Black Catholic music into our repertoire. So that is a goal that we have for this coming year, and to reintroduce some of that flavor. We have communities from Nigeria, so is there a way that we can begin to incorporate and have that musical tradition be part of our worshiping community week after week? So those kinds of goals begin to shape not only this local place, but broaden maybe the worldview depending on the people that are within your community coming together. So, and again, Rita pointed this out, and I cannot emphasize this enough. If we truly believe that the liturgy is the center of our Christian life, as all of our documents talk about, right, then this really should have the highest priority within the life of the parish community, because it is so formative, right? In the ways that this community the committee comes together, the way that we're forming and shaping, working with other councils, which we'll get to some of that conversation, but it has to have the highest priority, because it is so profound and has a profound impact on people. Because as you all know, this is maybe the 1 hour a week or a few hours a week that we actually encounter most of our parishioners. So the more prepared we can be and intentional about the decisions that we're making, those goals that we have, the more it's going to impact the person in the pew week after week. And not changing things week after week either. Set that goal and stick to that pattern or stick to something so that it can be embodied, can be part of the life of the community itself. I don't know if that answers that, but that's sort of what was kind of going on my mind.
No, I think that's so well said, both of you, and really sets a helpful context. I think, one of the excuse me, one of the things that I found, both having been in parish and in campus ministry situations, and then just as a member of my parish too, that I've also found that being in parish communities where there's an active and well-functioning or attempting to be well-functioning liturgy committee is also great, because it ensures that this liturgical life and experience within this parish community is the liturgical, or is a well-matched liturgical culture for this community, as opposed to, I am the music director / liturgist, and so I will be designing the way that we experience the gathering rite in Advent, and I will be designing the way that we experience Lent this year, and I will be choosing the way that we do all of these other things. As well-formed as I might be, and as refined as my tastes might be, right? And as much as I'm going to try to understand the community and its particular needs, nothing beats a liturgy committee that has its singular laser focus on this community. One of the things we have on the checklist, which is drawn from Kathy's article, which is also in the handout, is a question: do the members of the liturgy committee know, respect, and love the members of the parish community and assembly, right? In order to represent this group, how do we keep our eyes on this? And that's not a matter of suggesting an opposition between the liturgist or music director on staff and the committee. It's a matter of saying you need that breadth of people and attention and experience and the eyes and the hands and the hearts of all those people in order to do this job. And the only other thing I'll add, just to spike the ball on something that you both said or alluded to, the two quotes that for me stand out and sort of haunt me that I included in the handout are the last two, one from Sing to the Lord and one from Built of Living Stones. So from paragraph 5 of Sing to the Lord: faith grows when it is well expressed in celebration. Good celebrations can foster and nourish faith. Poor celebrations may weaken it. And then Built of Living Stones: liturgical participation commits a person to a life of faithful discipleship. And I think I've read a lot of parish and diocesan synod reports, and almost every single one of them alludes to belonging or welcoming, and some version of the maybe not so helpful phrase of Sunday experience, really referring to experience of the liturgy, liturgical life, and the way we are a gathered assembly in that liturgical life. We're all seeking to be better at that. We're all seeking to improve that. And not that this is a secret weapon or one-stop shop, but really, Rita and Timothy, what you laid out for us, the liturgy committee can be the sort of the cauldron where all of this, or the crucible where all of this gets melted down and reshaped into what it is we're seeking and what it is we're missing. And music directors and liturgists listening and pastors, it doesn't all have to be on your shoulders, right? You can execute, but you don't have to be the source and then pay the price for all of these particular things. Rita, you mentioned before, this is a group, or this is a work that requires a lot of people, right? Requires a whole cast of characters, or can. So maybe, thinking about how this liturgy committee works and really what it looks like. What does this committee look like? How does it function? If I'm a music director or liturgist listening, how do I sort of shape the way it functions? Let's start to get practical.
Okay. To get very practical, and we can talk about personnel in a minute, but there's sort of a core committee that might set the agenda for I recommend monthly meetings, and sometimes even more frequently in major liturgical seasons. That the parish liturgist or the parish music director and the chair of the parish committee and the pastor develop agendas, or perhaps multiple agendas, saying, like in March, we're going to be talking about ordinary time. In January, we're going to be planning Lent. You have to anticipate. You always have to be prevenient on all these types of matters. So that core committee may meet a little more frequently, and again, within the goal setting, advance the agenda. Your real agenda is going to be the liturgical year. You are the servant of the liturgical year, and that shapes what we're talking about and when we're talking about, unless of course the parish has an immediate need, or you can assess an immediate problem there. You're also kind of setting the agenda of new policies that may be coming down from the bishop. Maybe the Pope just announced something and we all have to react to it, and perhaps your office of worship has sent out something, and you're setting the agenda in that way. So that's what the big picture of what things might look like, and we've already mentioned how we might assess those. I like the agenda builder on page 17 of your handout. I would go a little further with it. Always, and I wish I had a chalkboard or a split screen here, but always begin with prayer.
Yeah. And
especially a liturgical prayer that might fit the season you're in. So we need to develop that liturgical spirituality of all of our members. I would begin with the minutes from the last meeting. And we've already talked about having some kind of secretary structure that, just to remind ourselves, here's what you received after our last meeting, any comments on that, and just very quickly review those minutes. Very quickly look at the agenda, seeing if there's anything we've missed. And this is typical of many of your parish commissions and councils. So this is a good structure for that: prayer, minutes, agenda approval. And then always old business and new business. Don't let something escape you. Follow up on past issues. John, we were going to talk to so-and-so about that. Has that happened, and how can we go forward? Evaluate. Always evaluate. So after the Triduum, what happened? What went well? What was spectacular? What do we need to improve? And here's where keeping those minutes can help you, because next year when you're starting to plan the Triduum, you can remind yourself, oh yeah, we meant to do that. I was working with one committee that said, well, this went well, and this went well, and this went well, but the ushers were absolutely terrible. They forgot to pass out the candles on Easter Vigil, and they didn't do this, and they didn't do that. And I looked right at them and I said, and who trained the ushers? You know, everybody had to be part of and participate fully in, especially in the Triduum. And it's not something we do every Sunday. So you have to have worship aides or more liturgical ministers or whatever that are involved in various roles. So evaluation is always critical, not just for big events like the Sacred Paschal Triduum, but for your first communion and confirmation and the 22nd Sunday in Ordinary Time. This should not be a complaint session. It should be a very quick evaluation of some things that you noticed that we could do better or that went very, very well. The old business also might be policy development. If Father has asked you to develop a policy on First Communion or sacramental preparation, in harmony with perhaps the Faith Formation Department in the parish, what's the status of that policy? Has Father approved it? Is it in harmony with diocesan policy, et cetera? So some old business that may be lingering or may simply be an ongoing project. Then the new business, you may have to react to papal pronouncements or new parish policies, or here's where staff reports might come in. That's on your handout, but here's where the staff might say, you know, we have an all-school mass coming up, or it's the 100th anniversary of the parish in 2 years. How are we going to plan for that? So practical things from the staff, or we just lost a member of the choir. How can we honor her, or something like that? So, and certainly the first staff report is from the pastor. What's happening, what the bishop may have asked him to do, or new personnel changes that might be coming up. So that would certainly be a new business and high on the list of new business. You bring up any new concerns from parishioners, and hopefully you've said that ahead of time to your chair and they can put that on the agenda. Mrs. Murphy has a concern about this, da, 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 da. And then we have certainly any upcoming liturgies of the season. So what seasons of the year are we anticipating? And again, not next week, but you're thinking 3 or 4 months out. Right. And I know Matt's got a good plan to help us look at those. Then also looking at liturgical ministry. That means you're looking at your liturgical ministers. Where do we need to recruit more? How do we need to train them better? What kind of evenings of reflection have we planned for October and November and February and so forth? And what kind of parish formation do we have planned? So those are all practical things that might be on an agenda. Again, retain those minutes, evaluate your liturgies, and have an agenda. I always say that the most important part of a meeting is the agenda.
Yeah.
Because other than that, you'll just end up just gabbing and talking about.
Right. Yeah. No, the agenda, I've always found the agenda is my best friend in trying to lead a meeting, because it keeps us moving forward, right? It keeps us starting. Right. It doesn't automatically keep us from getting stuck, but it sure helps. And I think too, you know, we have such a short period of time to gather, and it can feel so long, right? People will be excited to be a part of a group that has an agenda, that knows what its purpose is, where you're not meeting for 5 hours. You're going to have a hard time staffing a liturgy committee if you don't have meetings that are effective and well run. I want to mention
agendas that have minutes next to them.
And agendas, yes, exactly right. We're going to spend 5 minutes on this topic.
Yeah. That's right.
Yeah, which is always great, because I love the and I think there's a mention here. I love the ability to delegate. This is an interesting topic. We had 5 minutes. It clearly needs more discussion. So Rita and Timothy, why don't you get together before next month's meeting and come back with some solution?
Yeah.
Covers all manner of sin, right? One of the for those of you joining live, I put in the chat. You already have a link to the handout, but a link to 2 examples from different dioceses, one the Diocese of St. Cloud and one the Diocese of Lansing. These are resources from the diocese to parishes to help parishes establish or run or ensure effectiveness of liturgy committees or worship commissions. And so many of the things that Rita's mentioned, that Timothy will mention, we are expanding and there's Rita's holding up a printout, and we'll make sure in the follow-up email and in the show notes that we'll post on the website, we'll put these links as well. So if you're not able to see the links or open them, we'll make sure they're there. But this will go deeper. And again, they're just 2 examples. So you need to make sure this works for you and with your diocesan guidelines, with the way your parish functions, your pastor, etc. But 2 examples of how to run a meeting, who might be there, the topics you might address. This is going to sound self-interested, and in a sense it is. So we have these 10 or 11 free webinars this fall. Our last one on November 16th, which will feature Jeremy Helms, who's in the Office of Worship in the Archdiocese of Cincinnati and is currently the president of the National Association of Pastoral Musicians, and a couple other panelists, is specifically on liturgical assessment and liturgical evaluation. So as you're wondering, how do we look at Advent and Christmas after it's over? We'll talk exactly about how you do that. We'll provide you all kinds of examples for what that looks like. In the meantime, the St. Cloud example from the Diocese of St. Cloud has some preliminary liturgical assessment questions for major seasons and celebrations, and also for, just Sunday to Sunday. Maybe this month's meeting, we just look at the way we gather. Right, and we evaluate the way we gather. Maybe next month we're looking at liturgy of the word. So not looking past certainly our major seasons, but also Sunday to Sunday, school masses. How do we evaluate that? And then finally, you can find more information about this on the Center for Learning website. I am more excited than maybe I should be about a new program we have coming up called the Liturgy Forecast, which focuses on 6 different webinars, 3 months ahead of time. What do we need to know about a season? What do we need to be thinking about? And what I wish I had, how does that season fall in the calendar? And what are all of the weird things about how that season falls this year? Like in 2023, the fourth week of Advent is like 9 hours long, right? So how do we do that? Well, how do we get ahead of the messaging so people don't come to the Vigil Mass on Saturday the 23rd thinking it meets their Christmas obligation, for example, right? So all of these things, where does the Holy Family fall? A couple of years ago, what do we do when December 12th is the 3rd Sunday of Advent? Well, that means December 13th is Our Lady of Guadalupe. So all of those types of things, the Liturgy Forecast, you can check that out. Timothy, I'm going to throw you a little bit of a curveball. This is a little out of order, but one of the questions I wanted you to kick us off on. So we have these tasks, we have these to-dos, and Rita so helpfully laid out, the way a meeting might structure. We got to get people to staff this thing, right? We have to get people who agree to be members of this committee, who are willing to serve in this way, who have some skill or interest in this area. How do we think about inviting people, whether I'm getting a committee going or I have a committee that needs to have some turnover in membership? Talk us through how we might identify and then invite members to be a part of our liturgy committee.
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question in the sense Rita has named some of those folks already, that the pastor ideally, or his delegate, if for some reason he's not able to be part of it, should be on that. The musician, the liturgist, or if they're the same person. I mean, those are sort of the givens of some of the folks. But then with those given folks that would be on this, as you're kind of coordinating, and hopefully the pastor is on board with that, is you really want to begin to identify, as kind of a core team, if you will, what are the qualities of somebody that we're going to look for in terms of that, right? And so I kind of have a few things written down that may or not be helpful. But Rita certainly add to this as we're going through. But some qualities to think through or to seek out is you want to identify potential leaders that are already leading within the parish. But we also know we don't want just the same 12 that are on every committee, right? Because that burnout is a real thing. And that's also not effective if we're trying to listen to the whole community in the sense. So you want to make sure you're looking maybe in places that you haven't or individuals that wouldn't. So someone who is fully participating in the liturgical life of the parish, they're present Sunday after Sunday. They're engaged in maybe coming to the confirmation liturgy that's on a Saturday afternoon. They have a passion for liturgy that maybe you might have to tease out by taking somebody to coffee to find out and see. Do an informal interview, if you will, getting to know people in your parish in that sense. You're looking for somebody that has a rudimentary knowledge of liturgy, or at least a willingness to continue to develop that knowledge, that there's a hunger, there's a desire for that. So they might already have a sense of what the structure of the Mass is, or they're familiar with documents. But if they're not, then they want to know more in that sense. They have a good sense of who these liturgical ministers are, what a lector is, they don't have to have a master's degree in liturgy, right? But they have a basic understanding of what we're doing Sunday after Sunday. And there's a knowledge of the community. So people that are engaged already within the community will have a sense of who are sitting in our pews. What are the demographics, young, old, the ethnic diversity that's within our community. So they're attuned to that, they're sensitive to that, and they're willing to that. I think you're looking for someone who is also not selfish, and maybe that's too negative to say, but someone who, and maybe I'm speaking for myself in this way, that is willing and able to maybe let go of their own agenda, being part of that Paschal mystery so that they can serve on behalf of the betterment of the life of the community. And that takes some development and formation too. Not everybody comes in right away with that, but it takes time. Again, somebody that's collaborative and motivated, and thinking about who are these people? Are they the coordinators of the lectors? Because maybe in your parish you have each ministry has a head minister, if you will, or a coordinator. So are those the individuals? Are you relying on them to maybe identify somebody or to help name like, oh, I think these 5 people might be interested or to consider, something like that. Your faith formation coordinator, that's somebody to maybe consider. You're going to be working hopefully closely as you're preparing First Communions, Christian initiation, confirmations, all of those major liturgies. So they need to be in the conversation as well. Trying to think if I missed any of my notes here. No, I think that's kind of an initial list, and you probably are sitting there already kind of thinking, and Rita may have some more to add, but you're probably already being able to identify like, oh yeah, like I know this person, she or he kind of fits some of these qualities, but I've never thought to ask them.
Yeah.
Well, those might be the people to begin to have some informal conversations with, just to test the waters, to see if there's even interest. But we also have a role, I think, in creating or inviting people into this, in encouraging the gifts that maybe they don't recognize they have themselves. So that is part of our Christian ministry, is to call out their baptismal gifts that they do have, and encourage and help them build the confidence that maybe they can serve in this role in that way. So that, Rita, I don't know, I trust that you might have some other thoughts on that. So I'm going to throw it to you, because this could go a lot of different ways.
Yes, thanks, Tim. Yeah, certainly your own parish community will be the guide to how this is all developed, whether you're a small rural parish or a big suburban parish or a cluster of parishes. That will simply guide you. And if you are a cluster of parishes and you have individual ones plus a combined liturgy committee, you'll want representation from all the different parishes. To that good list you just put out, I too would avoid anybody that's coming with their own agenda.
Yeah. That
they're always voicing the fact that we just don't have enough devotions to Our Lady of Perpetual Help. It's just going to constantly bog down your meeting and its agenda. I certainly would add youth.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I always say, if you're going to put a youth on a committee, put 2, because they may have, football practice or whatever, but they And if one can't be there, the other could help, but they'll be much more comfortable, quite frankly, with their buddy there. And second of all, their opinion and their vision, it will be different than the rest of us. And I think it's a valuable voice to have at the table. Certainly the music ministry, the lectors, the EMs, the servers, representatives from all of those. If you're looking for somebody for art and environment, I always say, look for the lady who's sitting in the third pew that's always very well put together at Mass every Sunday morning, because she has good taste, you know, just think of people that, and again, not the same 12 that you all, you see at everything, because they'll, as devoted as they are to the parish, we need a broader.
Right. Well, Rita, I'm going to add or just piggyback on what you said about art and environment, because I think this, at least in my experience, oftentimes we don't always know or rely on who the artists are in our communities. And sometimes that's musical artists, but certainly textile or other kinds of art. And if you can begin to identify some of those folks, now, again, depending on the type of art or what they're doing, but they can be a great resource. And I do feel like that's a really untapped resource in many of our parishes, especially even with young people. You know, I have encountered in schools and various things where there are really interested young people who are good at art, or they're learning and they want to be engaged. And this is a great way to get them engaged and help them hone that gift, and encourage them maybe in the liturgical arts in a way that we really need to do more of, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's well said. You know, so we end up doing a lot of excuse me, formation coaching workshops. Not surprising, a lot of us do, around the topics of how do you recruit volunteers, because the harvest is plenty and boy are the laborers few, it seems like, especially post-COVID. And we have a couple of upcoming programs and things. And one of the things we'll talk about in all of these, and we always talk about, is you really have to like surgically know what you're looking for in order to unlock all of the best practices to then find it. And I think there's you have to be specific about what are the things you're looking for that can be developed or taught, formed, and what are the things you're looking for that someone has to come in pretty well ready to deliver on day one. So art and environment, I think, is a great example. And Timothy, I'm so glad you mentioned you know, the importance of artists, and Rita, that you mentioned it as an area of purview for the liturgy committee, because I think for many of us, we think liturgy committee is going to be all of the music choices and all the stylistic choices, and we forget environment, or we forget all of these other ministries, and this is the totality of it. But I can help someone who has an artistic skill or interest or ability understand built of living stones, right? I can help form them and teach that. I can't necessarily, or at least I can't necessarily teach them the taste and the skill and the artistic temperament for other things, right? So if I can say, I'm looking for somebody who has this type of interest or these type of skills, and put it out there to my colleagues on the staff or other people in my ministry, who do you know who can paint or can draw or is always interested in, etc. I can then have that conversation and say, I'm going to get you everything you need to know. Our committee is not going to let you fail in terms of the scheme you're coming up with for what the sanctuary is going to look like during Lent. We're not going to let you fail in terms of what we're looking for, but we really are finding a different way to harness that skill. I think that's really exciting, and we can do that. And that goes to all other areas too, what we're looking for in terms of hospitality, etc. The other thing I've heard from some people talk about for committees, and not just liturgy committees, but pastoral councils, etc., is, and you have to think about this more than I'm going to be able to describe it here, is thinking about almost like associate level members. Remember, these committees might meet every month. Does every single person need to be there every month? Maybe not. Maybe there's a stepping stone sort of associate level member where someone who doesn't know a lot about the liturgy, but is willing to learn, can come to the meetings where we're talking about liturgical life in our community and how we are called to gather this Advent with where we are in this time and space. Maybe that's a great way to have someone come in, participate, receive that formation, and over time, maybe they take on more of a role as they're building their own particular knowledge. So again, you have the ability to play with this too. You don't have to think about this as 30 people every third week trying to dig into these things, right? You have some more flexibility. Timothy.
Go ahead, Rita.
Or just someone that you need in a crisis.
Yeah.
So maybe there's a big a terrorist attack or a natural disaster, or the reaction after the George Floyd murder, etc. So use the people in your community that can help you with, be sensitive to things, psychologists, attorneys, etc. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's great.
No, that's fantastic. One of the things, Matt, that you were making me think of, at least I think this can be a familiar experience within parish life, is when you hear the word committee, it can feel daunting because you've seen, and maybe this isn't fair to say, like, poor committees like that aren't run well, or they're not effective, or they don't have this clarity, this agenda, or the vision that's laid out. And so I think one of the things I would advise is, if you're beginning to do something brand new, is don't just now go recruit tomorrow.
Right.
You need to have your plan. Be clear about who you need and articulate that, write it down, because then it's going to be much easier to go and meet with that person at a coffee shop. And I keep using that example because I think sometimes meeting informally outside of the parish is a lot more, because it's relational. It builds that relationship, and you can reaffirm, you can help build their confidence in, because you're acknowledging their gifts, and people like that when they can be affirmed and supported in that. And so and that's why I like what Matt said, the clearer we can be about what we're looking for or need, the kinds of people, then we can reinforce that and really encourage that particular gift. Like, you don't have to be a jack of all trades, but your voice adds to this conversation. Your voice, your experience, the way you see things, or whatever it might be, can be part of the conversation. And that I think is super important.
Yeah, we last week our Thursday webinar was on the topic of inviting volunteers, and we spoke a lot with our panelists in that meeting, Jason Prigge and Zach Stowski, about especially faith formation, liturgical music, ushers, those types of ministries, in inviting people. And one of the things we talked about that I think is so true is, you need to know what skills you're looking for to be able to then come up with your short list of conversations. But you also need to know, before you have the conversation, what is it you're inviting people into, right? So they know what they're being invited into, especially these days. I mentioned the example of, I have several good friends in my parish who have said, we have a shortage of lectors. Right. I don't know that this sounds like anybody else's experience out there, but we have a shortage of lectors, where we have the same person, more or less, or maybe two people who have at our Sunday 10 o'clock mass always lector. And I know several people, at least 4 or 5 people, younger people with kids, who have said, I would love to lector, but I don't want to have to get stuck lecturing every single Sunday. Because what they see is, Joe is up there lecturing every single Sunday. And if I volunteer, Joe's going to say, ha, and I'm going to be the one who's stuck, right? So point being, if your committee doesn't have a charter, get a charter. If you have a charter and it doesn't have things in there like meeting expectations, how often do we meet? Do I have to attend all of them, or which kinds? What is my term limit? What is my off ramp from this service, right? Think about putting it there, because if it's a matter of, like to your point, Timothy, oh my God, another committee. How does your committee function? How do you operate? So I know what my experience is going to be like. Can I come to a committee meeting just to experience it before I say yes? How much of my life am I dedicating to this? people are really sensitive to that, especially these days. So if you don't have those things before you have the conversation.
Yeah, I actually wrote down term limits before you started saying that, and I think again, this is experience in parish life. Even though this is just as a member of a parish, that is often very unclear.
Yeah.
It's just you're on this committee until you die, and that really shouldn't be the case, right? Some people may outgrow a ministry,
Right.
and so I would think, be very clear about what those term limits can be. Can you be reappointed for a second term, or do you have to take some time off? I know when I was in Salt Lake City, one of the things that we said in terms of our commission, our liturgical commission, and our subcommittees is you could serve one term, be renewed for another if the bishop so chose, but then you had to take time off.
Yes.
You could not be reappointed immediately for a third term, so that you had some time away. And then if down the road you were reappointed, fine, but you had to have some time off. And that might be something to consider too, so that you don't have the same six
Right.
people doing the same things all the time. So I do think that's important.
Yeah.
And if you're just forming a committee, it may be by pastoral appointment.
Yeah.
The staff may have some input and so forth, but the pastor may have already identified 8 to 10 people that he would like on it, and then let it grow. Then let it. Yeah.
And I would also recommend that if you're just starting or just revising, and you have your first 8 people, don't forget to in the appointment start with staggered appointments. So all 8 of them are not done in 3 years.
Exactly.
Because
exactly.
I know unfortunately we only have about 2 minutes left, and we have about 3 weeks of more things to talk about. So before we do sort of a final couple of things, again, I want to remind those of you joining us live, those of you watching afterwards, that you can find the handout. The handout has all kinds of other links. We did not get to talk about how to keep the committee formed, what resources. There's a beginning of a reading list. You can find certainly your office of worship or your diocese, or if you had a committee at one point in time and for reasons that no one remembers, it stopped meeting, hopefully somebody has those minutes, or you can see what exists. Hopefully there's a shelf someplace. This is a great opportunity to reach out to the FDLC, to reach out to your office, to reach out to the Center for Learning, to reach out to your colleagues at neighboring parishes to see what they do, to borrow a book. Things are available electronically now, thank the Lord, so you can find all kinds of things pretty quickly. Certainly if there's something that you're looking for, we at the Center for Learning are happy to help. One thing I'm going to point out that, as we talked about term limits and all these things, I always love reading, charters and realize that, trying to imagine what type of thing happened to get that line put into the charter, because that was something that's a response to an experience. And I love the example charter on page numbered. This is the second half of St. Athanasius. This is number 13 on page 15. The last line. So this talks about who else can attend a meeting and can people submit a suggestion, complaint, whatever. The last line is unsigned letters will not be considered by the committee in any way. So sometimes you have to learn from other people's mistakes or experiences or getting burned. So please talk to one another and share ideas and best practices. Again, Center for Learning has all kinds of things coming up, most of which are free. We have that evaluation conversation coming up in November. We had our volunteer conversation last week. We have 2 paid programs, but moderately priced, both Liturgy Committee and our professional learning communities on attracting and recruiting volunteers, and change management, all coming up this fall. So please check that out. And if there's something we can't help you with, we're happy to point you to somebody who can. So please reach out. Check out St. Thomas the Apostle's website in Chicago. If you're in town, stop by for Mass, say hi to Timothy. They'd love to have you. If you don't know the work of the FDLC, please check out fdlc.org. If you're in Cincinnati the second week of October, come on down to the national meeting for the FDLC. We'd love to have you. Masses with children are the topic, right, Rita?
Yes. So liturgical formation of children.
Liturgical formation of children, so a critical topic.
You can be an associate member of the FDLC, so you should consider that.
Exactly right. So please, there is a web and a whole constellation of people who are doing work to help you. So please take advantage of that. I want to thank you, Timothy and Rita, for being here. And I know we just scratched the surface, but I'm so glad that we did. And to all of you joining us live, all of you watching after the fact, wherever you are in this process, thank you for being at this point in the process, for beginning to think about what this might look like, for envisioning what this could look like, for believing that this could work. It really matters. Your community and your liturgy is better because of your work. And I know you likely don't hear that often, but I know it makes a difference and is noticed by the members of your community. So thank you for all of the work you are doing. It not only blesses your community for future generations, but for all of us who are members of this universal church. Your work makes a difference in all of our lives. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Continue to share ideas with one another. If you're at a meeting or a conference or a convention or something, and any of us are there, please come up and say hello. It's always great to meet people in person. Hopefully we'll see you on another webinar soon. Again, Rita, Timothy, thank you so much. Everyone else, have a wonderful week. God bless you all, and don't be strangers.
Great. Thank
Thanks
you,
for being
everyone.
here.
Thanks, everyone.